Welcome back to Organist Launchpad, a series of educational videos produced by the Royal Canadian College of Organists. My name is Jonathan Oldengarm, Minister of Music at Metropolitan United Church in Toronto, Ontario. In this final segment on Protestant hymn playing, we're going to consider 19th century gospel revival hymn tunes and some more contemporary hymnody, and how we can approach accompanying those and leading those on the organ. There are some special considerations in these kinds of repertoires, in that these hymns, for the most part, weren't conceived with the organ in mind originally. And in many ways, they're not overly conducive on their own terms to the medium of the organ and the organ sound. They're much more rhythmic and percussive. They profit from having piano accompaniment or guitars, or sometimes even a rhythm section along with it. And these are not self-evident kinds of textures to translate to the organ sound. But there's a great deal that we can do to make our leadership of the congregation clear and to allow the congregation to sing well and with success and with good support. We can even enrich what we do with the addition of other instruments. We could add some rhythm, we could add piano. There's a long tradition, of course, in the evangelical churches of having organ and piano playing on these kinds of 19th century hymns, often with a song leader who would direct traffic and point out the long fermatas and the dramatic rhetorical pauses in some of the hymns. There are well-established traditions of where those fermatas happen. But let's say that we're flying solo and we need to be the arbiter without visual cue. Let's take the hymn, "Come, Let Us Sing of a Wonderful Love," to the tune "Wonderful Love" as an example. It's in a fairly rollicking 6/4 meter, and it starts with a repeated note and some repeated harmonies and so on. So there's not a great deal to hang on to at the organ and in terms of organ sound, because our ability to project repeated notes on the organ isn't nearly as strong as it is on, say, the piano or bowed string instruments or other percussion. So we need to work harder. I take the first measure, for instance, as an example. Here goes. So what can we do to make that clear on the organ? The pedal is our friend, and a fairly heavily registered pedal that we use the way pizzicato double basses would function in the orchestra. So instead of playing sustained pedal notes like this, we could think about the double bass section playing pizzicati on the beats. And so on. Or if we wanted to be a little more elaborate, and if we have the leeway to do this because of choir or other situations, we could reharmonize a little bit so that we allow for some harmonic motion, which will make our task of projecting the rhythm easier. For instance, we could add a walking bass line. And this approach, fairly free, improvisatory approach to these hymns, often works well. It's possible to solo things out, of course, and to move the melody around, as we've seen in the 17th century and 19th century hymns as well. There's a great deal of room for creative orchestration here to enrich the texture. If we look at another much more contemporary 20th century tune, Praise the Lord with the Sound of Trumpets. This one works more easily in some ways because of the way it's arranged in most hymnals. There's a fairly incisive bass line that's written with rests and so on, so it really does help us. The key, though, is to be extremely rhythmic and not to leave anything to chance. Again, we'll come back to a principle that we talked about in the very first video of this series, the difference between being rhythmic and being metronomic. And in the case of this particular hymn, we probably need to be a little bit more metronomic and quite strict about it, but it still has a sense of phrase and a sense of give and take within limits. So here goes. It's also a continuous hymn in that between the two verses, there's a bridge that goes straight into the next verse. So how to project that clearly as well is a bit of an art. There's also a question of what we do at the end of the introduction. Do we end with the bridge, or do we do a full stop and restart? Either is possible. In a situation without a choir or a hymn leader or a song leader or somebody giving the congregation a visual cue, I prefer the full stop at the end of the playover, and that's what I'll do here. I'm going to play two verses for you with two different kinds of registrations, just to give a sense of a couple of possibilities of what can be done here. I'm also going to add notes, definitely in the little interludes between the sung phrases. You can find this at number 245 in Voices United. It's in many other more contemporary hymnals as well. So you'll note that I did a little bit of dynamic variation, not as much as I might do in a service, but for the purpose of the exercise, yes. And with some soloing here and there, the soloing can come and go. The main thing is to make sure that the rhythmic direction of everything is crystal clear, and that anything you add harmonically inevitably leads into the next phrase so that the congregation is clearly led. I hope that these videos have been helpful to you and that they will expand your repertoire of techniques and help you, inspire you in your learning and your ongoing practicing. I wish you every success. Thank you for watching.